Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 rated sportsbook out there. I'm your host, Rudo, joined as always by AJ Hayfley, and our guest on the show today to talk a little bit of draft from ESPN, their draft analyst, Chris Peters. Chris, thank you for coming on the show. Hope you're doing well. Are you finally ready for this draft to be over?
Very much ready. It's the never-ending draft class, and I have been thinking about it way too much for way too long, and I will be very much glad to clear out all of that knowledge in the podcast leading up to the draft and finally the actual draft analysis, and then we move on to 2021 because the draft season never ends.
So it would seem, and that's kind of the crazy part is you're already getting your 2021 lists out. Not just everyone has their early lists, but all of a sudden it's almost October. So you have to kind of balance both a little bit at this point.
Yeah, you do. And, I haven't spent as much time as I normally would have on, the upcoming class because I would have been seeing guys at live games this time of year. And that's obviously not happening yet. I mean, we're going to have some leagues starting up here pretty soon, but yeah, it's you kind of have to always be ready to move on and not knowing what the schedule is going to look like for the rest of the season. You have to, do your homework and make sure that you're ready. So yeah, I think I may let this draft breathe a little bit more than I normally would before I throw out my early 2021 list, so I can make sure that it's salient and I feel like I've got the focus right. But yeah, I think at this point it's just I'm ready to get moving on with 2020, and at least this was a fun class to track and everything like that. So it's but I won't be sad to see it go.
Not to spend too much time on 2021, but I am curious how you're like the guy at ESPN. There are a lot of these draft publications that do this year round, but they have it all split up kind of like an NHL team does, where they have somebody who does the OHL and the WHL and the Q. You don't have like a team of people that do this. So right. How do you prioritize your live viewings?
Usually it's however many I can chunk together. I'm looking at there's going to be an emphasis on bigger events like international tournaments, World Under-18s, World Junior, showcase events like the USHL Fall Classic and things like that where you can see a lot of players in a brief amount of time. The nice thing is that I can schedule trips out to the OHL and I can see 4 or 5 games in a week out there and drive. Fly to Toronto and then drive, wherever I have to go. There are other events like the Russia-Canada series and things like that. So some of these things I'm not going to have this year to do that. So, I think there's going to be a much larger emphasis on video going forward. I always prefer – this is the first time since I've been at ESPN where I was ranking many, many more guys that I saw on video than I saw live. So I always prefer to have the live viewings. It's certainly, there's a lot more that you can get out of that. But with 2021 in particular, I wasn't zeroing in on those guys as much. I normally start doing that towards the end of the season when I'm putting the finishing touches on 2020, and then I'm moving on and looking at those other guys. So it just requires a lot more video homework to do it for next year. And then hopefully we'll be able to get some semblance of normalcy, and I will be able to go again to see players live. But because I know there are a lot of teams out there that they would much prefer to be in the arenas than behind a computer screen.
How hard was putting you talking about putting the finishing touches on 2020? So many of the big events that happen in the draft cycle happen at the end.
Right.
Between the Memorial Cup, between the U18s, the Junior A Challenge, all those things, the Combine even, all of those are vital towards to the draft process to go. And this year, none of them. Mm-hmm. You have none of them. So do you feel like there's a lot better maybe value to be had in guys who otherwise would have been those late risers, guys who are going to go in the second and third round? Are we going to look back on this class and see a richer middle rounds than we otherwise would have because of those?
It's tough to say, I think I certainly miss those events just because there's so much value for those being at the end of the season because it's the culmination, it's especially like the World Under 18s where all those all the European clubs, their seasons are over. They've switched in and for me, I was banking on that event, especially with it being in Michigan this year, to get live views on guys that I didn't get enough live views of, and mostly it was on video. So you're saying, I saw this on video, let's see how it looks live. So you miss that confirmation. So I know for sure, at least on my board, there are definitely guys that I'm probably undervaluing that I would have had a better read on if I had seen them live. This won't be the case for teams. Teams obviously now have much more a robust scouting staff. They would have seen all the guys that they're picking live. They would have had extra video views. They might not have had as many crossover viewings where other scouts got to see them, which is an integral part of the process. But I do think that teams that have done their homework and did all the work leading up to when things stopped and then continued that homework through video and whatever else they were able to do with Zoom interviews and all that stuff will be those teams will be better positioned than some teams that maybe were a little bit behind the eight ball. But I think by and large, most teams, especially most scouting staffs, were already kind of integrating video into their process. And so I feel like that this is just kind of that on steroids a little bit, where it's just you had to do a lot more video and there was a lot more double checking. And, in some regards, you get to see more games of a player and have a larger sample to judge off of because of that. Mm-hmm. But there's also the times where you're like, I'm just not seeing as much as I would have if I saw him live.
So getting into the 2020 draft a little bit here, AJ asked this question of Jared Brown, who we had on the show the other day. But outside of the big three, who do you think has the highest ceiling in this class?
That's a good question. I think, there's basically for me, you got the top three, which, we've got Lafreniere, Byfield, and Stützle. The guys that are coming right after that, you got Lucas Raymond, Cole Perfetti, Marco Rossi, Jamie Drysdale, Jake Sanderson, Yaroslav Askarov. I feel like that group and Alexander Holtz, that group, if you take those guys in any order after those top three, I'm not going to begrudge that the GM. However, I think like in terms of pure upside, the two guys that I feel like have the most would be Lucas Raymond and Cole Perfetti. I think Perfetti, neither of them are big guys. They're average size players, but they're exceptionally skilled. Raymond's a little bit quicker. He has a little bit more pace to his game. Perfetti is more of a cerebral player. I think when I'm looking at players, I'll have my final list out really soon. And so, these are the two guys that are 4 or 5 for me. And for me, the Perfetti's brain and his hockey sense, his vision and the skill, that's what I think allows him to have that high ceiling, to be a top end producer, to be a guy that's going to put up a lot of points. He had a great season in the OHL. I think he's super just an intelligent hockey player. He's intelligent off the ice too. He was the OHL Scholastic Player of the Year. And at one point was committed to play college hockey. And, I think for him, I'm fascinated by his entire skill set. And the skating needs to improve. And that's one thing that could limit his ceiling, is if he doesn't get that extra gear of quickness, then that gives me a little bit more concern. And maybe I start leaning more towards a Lucas Raymond at that point. But I also don't discount Jamie Drysdale, Jake Sanderson and Yaroslav Askarov in that mix either, because Askarov very well could be. I view him as a number one goaltender, a guy that's going to have a long career in the game as soon as he gets over here from Russia. And then Sanderson and Drysdale both have that potential to be a number one or number two top pairing defenseman, and that's incredibly valuable as well. So those guys are so tightly bunched for me in terms of like if we're tearing off this draft, you got your Lafreniere one, then Byfield, Stützle real tight, and then the rest, and those guys are super tight. So I think if you're picking in the top 10 this year, you're landing a guy that's probably going to be the top prospect in your system in most cases. So it's pretty fascinating to see how good that group is.
Are you worried at all? Because when I as much as I love Cole Perfetti's game, but a guy like Dylan Strome, makes me a little nervous there, where it was the same thing. You thought that the vision, the creativity, the IQ, all of that is going to play up. It's going to translate perfectly to the NHL. And then you just worry about the feet. And then the feet have been a major factor in limiting his upside, where he's a decent NHL player, but a top 5 pick.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's totally fair. And I think, the other benefit that Dylan Strome had that Perfetti does not is that, he's a big body as well. And, had at least range in terms of size. I think the hockey sense is a major compensating factor. And I think that his is at a level higher than Dylan Strome's was at that point. And there's no question Dylan Strome has great vision. He's a playmaker. I think Perfetti's better in those elements. And also, one of the things is he's such a great playmaker, but he's also a very gifted goal scorer. I mean, this is a guy who came into the season. He led the Ivan Hlinka Gretzky Cup, was second in goals, and was just scoring at will and was scoring in shootouts and everything else. And that was a big moment for him. But then you see he's such a shot pass threat, where I think Strome is a much more, pass first player. Perfetti is more of a shot pass threat, and being that makes you more difficult to defend. And if you're as smart as Perfetti is, you have his ability to pick the right play is incredible. Like, it's always an opportunity. Like, he's always seeing the play develop in front of him. He's finding the right guy. He's making the right choice if it's a shot or if it's a pass. He doesn't force too many things. And that's because I think his processing speed, which is maybe more important than foot speed, and no question foot speed is important, but I think his ability to process the game, that's the thing that I think gives him the edge to make him, a top 5 pick, a top 5 caliber player, on top of having just tremendous hands as well.
That's what I wanted to hear.
So we've covered kind of the top 10 here a little bit. Unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, depending on how you look at it, that doesn't affect the Avs really at all. We'll get to the Avs pick in a bit, but my favorite question about the draft every year is, at the back of the first round, do you have any late risers? Do you have someone unexpected that you think
I think
in the first?
Starting off, we're starting to see some guys that are still playing right now that have that, potential to be, a later first round kind of gamble, but, could be a really good player. I mean, one of the guys that's kind of been a late riser for me and for others is Helge Grans, a big defenseman out of Sweden, very good make great passer. Foot speed is a little bit of a concern, but he's got size. He defends well. Does a lot of things well, and plays a top 4 role in the SHL right now as a teenager. He's one of those guys I could see sneaking into the end of the first round there. I still have him more in that early second round range. It's just for me on defense, I think the mobility situation, that's one where I get a little bit concerned, but his ability to move the puck is really intriguing, and transition is intriguing to me. So I think that he's a guy that has a chance to do that. I think another guy that it wasn't necessarily a late riser, but a guy that kind of had a better second half of last season before things shut down, and I think did himself a few favors, is Thomas Bordello, who's headed to the University of Michigan this year. And he's outside of Jake Sanderson, who's one of the top defensemen in the draft. He's probably the only other national team development program player with a legitimate chance to be a first round draft pick. He's crafty, skilled. Averaged about a point per game this year on a team that did not score a lot. He was a go-to threat for them. Makes some good plays down low. Not a huge frame, but he's got good quickness and can make plays. And I think he's going to play a pretty substantial role at the University of Michigan, which is a freshman-laden team this year. So very fascinated by, those two guys. They're on different ends of the size spectrum, different ends of the skill spectrum. But those are the types of players you're looking kind of in that later first round, early second that can, make an impact.
We haven't talked a ton about the USNTDP and the USHL this year. Granted, they don't have the super insane class like they did last season, but how do you balance a system that plays the majority of their games either in international competition or against lesser competition like the USHL as compared to the CHL leagues?
Well, I think you have to understand too with that team in particular is the fact that they're all 17 years old. So unlike other junior teams, they don't have any 19 and 20-year-olds to help bail them out. And as the USHL, for as it might not have the caliber of talent as the CHL in terms of the highest end guys, but their middle range is very similar. And I think that makes it a difficult league to play, and it's a hard league to score goals in. We saw, the Chicago Steel and the U.S. National Team Development Program. These are teams that typically will have that higher skill player, and the Steel have a couple of guys that could either go first, second round, and they scored at will this year, and that's very rare for the USHL. So, I think the other thing that you have to factor in is just with the NTDP having that balanced schedule where they're not all just playing USHL and international, but also Division I colleges. Those are the games where you can start seeing some of those guys separate. And I think that's where you see like a guy like Jake Sanderson. It's like, wow, he really performed well against colleges. They played the University of North Dakota, and I'm pretty sure the North Dakota coaching staff after that game said, can we have him now? Because he was so good in those games, and, he's a late riser. So, I think the talent always stands out. Like, you got a guy like Brendan Brisson, who had such a tremendous year for the Chicago Steel, who scored a ton of goals. And I think coming into this year, nobody expected that kind of season from him coming out of Shattuck St. Mary's. He's a good player, a draftable player. Was he a first-round talent? I don't think many people believed that at that point. So, I think that the fact that the USHL has continually developed a league where there's balance, this is one year where the Steel were such an exceptional team outside of the league. But typically it's a very, parity-driven league. It's a tough league to play in. So, a lot more teams, typically the USHL will have a lot of players with connections drafted from that league in the later rounds. They don't have as many first-round guys, but they have a lot of players drafted later. So, I do think that, there are differences in evaluating the talent. But I think when I'm looking at top prospects and I see a guy like Brendan Brisson, I say, hey, this is a guy that found space in a league where it's hard to find space. And that says a lot about his game.
Speaking of Chicago and the USHL, started to hear a lot about Sam Colangelo.
Mm-hmm.
A lot about him lately. Could you just touch on him real quick as to why there seems to be a lot more around him sneaking into the end of the first round?
Yeah, I think part of it is, he's got a good frame, a good size. There's definite skill there. He had tremendous numbers in the USHL this year. And he hasn't risen to that level for me as a guy that should be in the first round conversation. I know that's not necessarily, I think he's a polarizing prospect. There are a lot of teams that really like him. There are teams that don't have as much time for him. But I think the reason that you see it is, the numbers certainly. The fact that, he played in the big events like the Hlinka Gretzky Cup 2 years ago. He played in the World Junior A Challenge. You've gotten a chance to see that. He's also going to Northeastern University, which has had a tradition of late of offensive talents flourishing there. We think about Tyler Madden and Adam Gaudette, Tyler Sakura. There are a lot of guys. There, Dillon Sakura. There are a lot of guys there that played, and have developed well. I think the one thing that for me that gives me at least a little bit of pause is, Chicago was so good, and you wonder how much of the talent of that team allowed individuals to break out. I think Brisson was more of a driver. Colangelo has tremendous skill. I think the finishing in terms of, he makes so many plays, but there were a lot that he could also leave on the table in terms of, not finding the right guy, not making the right read. I think that the physical tools are there. There have been I've had some concern about the hockey sense at times. But I think the reason that you hear about him in the later rounds is not just so much about him, but as it is about this class. There's not a ton of consensus. You think about like 20 to 60, you look at that chunk of players. I mean, there are plenty of guys in that mix as low as might be 60 on my board that could go in the top 30. And I think that there's just not a lot of consensus there. So guys like Colangelo who have that skill and size combination, that you're like, hey, I'm going to take a bet. I think there's more risk in a player like him, but there's a chance to take a bet there. And so I'm very fascinated to see where he goes. Again, for me, he's more of a early to mid second round guy, but I can totally understand and have heard teams that view him as a first round talent.
We do need to take our first period break as this podcast is sponsored by Breckenridge Brewery, the official beer of DNVR. You can get it down at the DNVR bar, 8 different kinds on tap, or get it from the source directly in Littleton at the farmhouse. They are now open for social distancing if you want to go in, or you can always get your pickup beer from noon to 8 p.m. Just call 303-803-1380 and use code DNVR to save $5 when you pick up. And our primary sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook, giving you amazing odds for another week of football. Bet $1 on any football team, and if they win, you can win $100. If you are a new user, jump on that. If you haven't already, it's gonna disappear really soon. So go win yourself $100 if you can. If football's not your thing, you can bet on pretty much anything. European hockey's back, you can bet on that. Basketball's finishing up, you can bet on that. Racing, you name it. Table tennis, I've seen all sorts of crazy sports, even esports you can bet on at DraftKings. So
League of Legends World Championships.
Yeah, there you go. Jump on it, get yourself some money, win some sports betting, esports betting, whatever you want to do. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code DNVR when you sign up. Get that $1 bet for a $100 win offer in the NFL. Again, $1 for $100, 100-1 odds. You can't beat it. Code DNVR to get signed up for that for a limited time at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. Colorado only. Profit boost terms and conditions and eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. All right, let's get to it then. Avs pick 25th. Chris, who you think they targeted at 25?
Oh, man. Well, again, it comes back to this is the range where I think that the consensus just kind of goes away. And so you're looking at what's available there. Is it a Brendan Brisson? I think that is it a Sam Colangelo? Both of those guys are options there. I think that you wonder, is Hendrix Lapierre, how far is he going to fall if he falls at all? And, here's a guy that was injured for most of the season. Had we had more hockey to play last year, he could have made a better case for himself in the second half of the year. And unfortunately, the season's canceled just as he's starting to get healthy. When he had just a tremendous Hlinka Gretzky Cup. That's something you put some weight into, but then, when he was healthy for the little bit of time that he was for the QMJHL season, wasn't as dominant, but he also had a tremendous season last year. So how much weight do you put into that? So guys like him are, those opportunities to look for upside. I think, the Avalanche in particular are in such a good position because the top end of their prospect pool at the moment is quite good. You've got, you have a center, you have a defenseman, you have, and then you have the young talent that's already on the roster. So, I think that they don't necessarily have, they at least they have the luxury to maybe take a shot or to see kind of what, bet on some upside there. A guy that I have no idea where he's going to go, but is fascinating to me is Lukas Reichel. And I have him more as like a 17-ish, like in that 17 range. And he's a guy that I could see very easily falling to that 25-ish range. And he's high in skill. He's got a good shot. He's a guy that's going to need time to develop. The Avalanche don't have any immediate needs, which you're not going to fill at the 25th pick anyway. So why not bet on, upside? And I think that for me, one of the highest ceilings in this draft based on where he is right now is Lukas Reichel. And I think that we have a hard time ranking players like him because how many have come out of the German Elite League over the years? In this draft, we're going to have 3 potential first rounders from that league, including JJ Peterka, who's another guy who could be an option as a goal scorer at 25. So lots of different kind of things coming into play there, but that's the type of caliber of player that I think is available to the Avs there. And I would like to, if I were in their shoes, I would be looking for a longer term prospects. And I think Lukas Reichel is, and guys like him are the best option if available.
It's a bit of a cliche, but especially when you're picking in the latter half of the first round, it is kind of one of those situations where teams should let the draft come to them, right? And take whoever's left, whoever falls.
Right. Yeah. At that point, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to make big strides positionally where you're going to say, well, you're just going to go off your board, and your board is what it is. And you're going to, you're going to have it set. And when whatever the first name is left there, I think it's an easy decision, especially this year, because I think that this draft, there's a lot of uncertainty. You know, the things that we lost, the different kind of, you know, you just go with what you're comfortable with, and you spent all that time building that list. Just stick with it.
With it being a virtual draft, how much do you think that's going to impact maybe potential movement during the draft, on draft day, teams wanting to move up and down? Do you think it'll be easier, or do you think it'll, just because they're going to be using, you know, Zoom and they'll have all these different things that they're not accustomed to, do you think it'll be tougher for them?
I don't know if it'll be tougher. It's going to be tougher for the insiders because they're not going to see who's talking to who on the draft floor. You know, like that's going to be, I think that's where it's tough. I mean, really, if you think about it, you know, when they're making deals, they're typically doing it over the phone. They're typically doing it, you know, maybe they'll do it over Zoom. I don't know. I think where it can have an impact is when you do have some of those tight decisions. The general manager might have an opinion about which way to go, and, you know, the board's a little different. And we've heard about times where these picks have been switched at the draft table, and, you know, snap decisions can be made. I still think that we're going to see movement. I don't know if it will be more or less than normal, just because I think that more than anything, the flat cap and those are the types of things that are going to impact this, and the GMs will do what they need to do. Based on what I've heard, I think that, you know, the challenging thing is that you're not going to have your whole team right there. I think a lot of teams aren't going to be able to bring in their entire staff to the same room. You know, there's going to be a lot of them will be either over Zoom or whatever. So, you know, you're hoping that your IT department is on top of things. You know, I think that most cases, like the executives will be allowed in their buildings and all those different things, but, you know, you won't have all your amateur scouts there, or all the people that would normally be at your table. So that's one of the changes. But I don't think, you know, in terms of the pace of the draft or the ability to make moves, I don't think that's going to be impacted as much as, you know, just it's certainly easier to do it when you can just go walk across the floor and talk to a GM. But how often are they on the phone on the draft floor too? You know, so I mean, it's just kind of it's just one of those things where you know, these guys, this is what they do, so they'll find a way to make it happen.
All right. Chris, I know you're a busy man, don't want to take up too much of your time, but I did want to take one shot in the dark. Avs don't have a second round pick. They do have a third. Give me someone in the depth of this draft that's a good pick.
Yeah, you know, the third round is going to be, I think that's a spot where you're going to see some more goaltenders go. You're going to see some of those kind of longer range prospects go. I think, you know, for me, there's one collegiate defenseman that I like kind of as a third round range player. Who I think is, you know, he's old for the draft, but I think he's the type of guy that if you don't pick him, teams are going to be going after as an undrafted free agent. That's Declan Carlisle, who plays at Merrimack University or Merrimack College, and he is he's a two-way defenseman. He was one of the top defensemen in hockey, or top freshman defenseman in Hockey East this year. You know, showed a lot more offensive pop, really strong defensively. He went up against a lot of tough teams, you know, and the one live viewing I got of him this year, he happened to shut down the number one offensive line in the country, that including Jack Dugan from Providence College. And I was really impressed with that. And I went back and watched more video of Carlisle and became more fascinated with kind of his whole game. So he's the kind of guy that, you know, I think that, sorry, my phone is beeping at me here as I'm trying to talk to you guys. It's not even on, but anyway, you know, so guys like that, I think, you know, I think that one of the things that you can do now is look at those second and third year draft eligible players where you have more of a book on them. You have that they're better than they were, you know, a few years ago. They have a shorter timeline, but still not a guy like, especially if you pick out of the college ranks or the USHL, you know, a guy that you can stash away that you don't have to spend a contract on in a couple of years. Those picks have more value. So a guy like him is kind of like what I would be looking for. But, you know, I think we're going to see, you know, the goaltenders, the second tier goaltenders go in that third round range, and you know, a lot of those kind of like shot in the dark prospect picks. You know, but there's and just to shout out one other guy that is a late bloomer and another draft eligible for, this is a third year draft eligible, is Igor Sokolov from the Cape Breton Eagles. I think they dropped the Screamin' this year. He was great in the World Juniors for Russia. He was a guy that had been passed over because he was kind of out of shape. He had heavy feet. He's improved his skating. He's improved his fitness. He's a big body. has a power forward potential, and he's just a guy that I think, if he's not gone by the end of the second round, I think, the third round is a really fair range for a guy like that to go. And he's the kind of player that I think that, you can just work with in terms of fitness, nutrition, everything else to get him where he needs to be an NHL player, because the talent is obviously there.
That he is a tank of a human.
He is. I call him the fridge, and I love it. So yeah.
Got to draft him just on nickname alone at that point, I think. Chris, thank you for coming on the show. You can find all of his stuff at ESPN.com/NHL. Anything specific you want to plug?
No, we're going to have one more mock draft coming out at the end of this week, and then also or at the beginning of next week before the next draft. I'll also have my final top 100 rankings, and that's all on ESPN.com, ESPN Plus, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So I'm really excited to get this draft going, and let's do it. Let's get rid of the 2020 class and start working on 2021. But let's have some fun to close it out here.
I'm ready. I'm ready for it to be done. So thank you again for coming on. Much appreciated to talking draft with us. I know you got to get out of here. So have a good one. We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for having me, guys. It was great to be with you. And enjoy the draft.
We'll
see you.
All right. That segment was sponsored by MSU Denver Online. MSU Denver Online puts a dynamic education at your fingertips without forcing you to decide between earning a degree and living your life. MSU Denver is the Colorado institution providing rigorous and affordable online programs taught by professors who bring the real world into the classroom. MSU Denver graduates use their relevant degrees to land coveted jobs, and some of our very own staff members here at DNVR took classes over the summer. So if you have any questions, hit up Ali Monroy or Harrison Wind, and they can tell you what you need to know. It's super easy to jump into classes for one semester. If you're taking a little bit of a gap year, you can keep up a little bit by going to MSU Denver Online. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Just had some good draft conversation, but AJ, are you ready to get dirty, greasy a little bit here, down in the mud?
We're gonna roll around in it, huh?
A little bit of rolling around in it. Where should we start? I've been hearing a lot of chatter about potential goaltenders for the Avalanche. I'll tell you one right off the bat. I heard a lot that I want nothing to do with is Henrik Lundqvist.
Okay, I guess we can tackle that a little bit. With the news yesterday of the Rangers buying him out.
Yep.
He's a free man.
He is free.
So where does he take that next? Why Colorado doesn't make any sense is the Avs already have two guys.
Yeah. When you look at Lundqvist over the last 3 years, I cannot definitively say that he is a better option than either of the Avs' current goaltenders. So even if you can get him on the cheap, it just doesn't make a ton of sense to go out and acquire a guy where you're talking about you can't seriously believe that he's an upgrade to Francouz even, let alone Grubauer.
One of the things that I think is a concern as well with Lundqvist is if you look at some of the goalie fancy stats.
Yep.
One of the concerns here is that Madison Square Garden's stat tracking is notorious for their shot distance being much closer, which raises the quality of the expected goals.
Saves,
and then which when he stops pucks raises the quality of the goaltender's play based on all of those numbers and all that stuff. The expected goals, the expected saves and goals and all that formula that gets used to kind of look at how well is this goalie doing beyond simple save percentage and goals against average, and the most basic of basics that we always talk about. But that would be one of my concerns, is that Madison Square Garden is notorious for this. It's the same way, and then this is one of those things that actually hurts you. The same way that the Islanders rink is notorious for pumping up the hit statistics.
Yeah.
Like, who cares, right? Like, it doesn't, like, nobody's nobody's going out there and paying extra money because a guy has X number of hits
or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Like they're going to go out there. They're going to sign that guy because they like the, a team likes him because he's physical anyway. They're not looking at the difference between 140 and 120 hits and saying, well, we got to have the 140 hit guy, so like the Islanders, and their rink bias there doesn't play as big a role in it. But at MSG, with the way that that stat tracking has gone, I think that's interesting. And one of the reasons why, when you look at some of these models and some of these fancier stats for the goaltenders, you see some of the Rangers goalies sitting there. Because it's like, look, they're being given credit for accomplishments that are maybe overblown a little bit, a little exaggerated.
Yeah.
And so it gives me pause when I look at any of their goaltenders. And with Lundqvist, certainly, you look at some of the goalie fancy stats, and they have him as kind of like a replacement level guy, like very borderline, like right on the edge, right? Like they say that he hasn't totally fallen off yet, but when you consider that rink bias is in play, it makes you wonder, like, has he actually been below average for the last several years? And that's
those shots that are going in are, instead of being inside the circles, actually beyond the circles, all of a sudden things start feeling a lot worse.
Certainly. And then you're like, this is obviously a third goaltender conversation for Colorado specifically.
Yep.
But again, like, knowing that, you're not going to move Francouz for this stage of his career, Hank.
Yep.
You're not going to move Grubauer for this stage of his career, Hank. Now, if Grubauer's injury is serious and long-term and required surgery and is something that they think could stretch into February or March, that's a very different conversation where you're comfortable playing Francouz however many games, but you're going to want a higher level third guy than you maybe otherwise would want, because Grubauer, if Grubauer is not going to be healthy into the start of next year, and for the record, that's purely speculative on my part. We don't know. The team has gone completely dark on any information about these guys. So I think it will be instructive what decisions they make at that position. Because if they get a guy like Hank, then you have to think Grubauer's injury is a little more long-term. If they get a more
third
this is an AHL guy. He doesn't really ever have success at the NHL level for an extended period of time, but he's got some experience. We kind of like him.
A dude that works in a pinch.
Yeah. And is kind of like your Michael Hutchinson type, because as much as we talk about, you need to go out and get a better third goalie than Hutchinson, like Michael Hutchinson is the archetype of a third goaltender, a guy with NHL experience, a guy who's had some success, has had plenty of failures, and that's why he's not a regular. It's why he doesn't have a full-time backup job.
Anyone significantly better than Hutchinson is playing in the NHL already.
And has a comfortable backup spot already. And a team will pay for those guys.
Yep.
Thomas Greiss is gonna be a free agent. Like we saw he did plenty fine in a platoon and backup roles for the Islanders over the years, not just under Barry Trotz, but before then too. And that's all good and well. But again, like, why would Thomas Greiss come to Colorado? And you're not getting rid of either one of your guys because Thomas Greiss is available. Like, that's, you're shuffling deck chairs at that point. You're not getting significantly better or worse. You're just changing the player because you can.
Yep.
If you're going to address the third goaltender position in a meaningful way, I mean, Colorado's just not really in a position to do that. They're in a position to do a Michael Hutchinson type, and Anthony Stolarz, or this next guy we're going to talk about.
Well, let's talk about him then, AJ.
We have to find a Columbus connection somewhere.
Yeah, always do.
Okay? And if you look at the Columbus, you go back and you look at where we could find a Columbus connection, it's in Anton Forsberg. He's a free agent. He's with Carolina right now. I'm just saying, keep an eye out.
Even has a good name, so
he's got a last name that casual Avalanche fans will accept.
Yep. So
Anybody that actually pays close attention and digs into it a little bit probably will be less excited about this. But I'm just saying, just keep an eye out.
He played for JB in the AHL, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. He played for Lake Erie in 15-16. So, yep, there's the connection. Might as well just wrap it up now. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he played a bunch for Chicago a couple of years ago and was like, okay. And you keep in mind that Chicago defense has been a disaster for a while now. And he's all right. And I think he's 28, 27, 27.
27, yep.
He turns 28 in November. So again, like just another name to add to the pile of like, keep an eye on it. And like, that's clearly a guy that will go and play in the AHL. Doesn't have an issue with it. Has played a lot of AHL games in the last couple of years. Fine.
Yeah.
If the Avs had Anton Forsberg in Game 7 against Dallas instead of Michael Hutchinson, do I feel significantly different going into it? No.
Not really.
No.
Yeah. It wouldn't feel great. I think that's... I said this at the start of the year when we were having the same conversation about how the Avs need a third goaltender. Yeah, having one is nice, but you got to be healthy in the playoffs. If you're playing your third goaltender in a playoff series, you just can't expect anything.
Yeah, I mean, you have to just get better luck on the injury front. You know, with Grubauer, a serious non-contact injury when he goes to make a routine save in the first period of Game 1. And people want to get upset and like blame Grubauer for that. And it's like, and you look at Grubauer's career, he's been healthy more often than not. This isn't like a guy that has a huge string of injuries and he's always hurt and you're always going up against it. He's had 2 years in Colorado. He's had one healthy year and one unhealthy year. Like, let's stay on earth here a little bit, you know, and then with Francouz, finding out that Francouz was hurt going into it,
yeah,
it makes you feel different about that performance against Dallas, where he was so bad, and it was just like
becomes should the Avs have considered giving up on an injured Francouz earlier in that series?
Definitely, you know, if what does Colorado look like if Francouz plays games 3 and 4?
Right.
Or I'm sorry, if Hutchinson plays games 3 and 4. I don't know.
Maybe Hutchinson doesn't get the job done, or maybe the Avs, pull out a second win.
Yeah, maybe nothing changes.
Yeah.
We'll never know. It's all left up to the what if gods at this point.
Yep.
And what's done is done. Looking ahead, when we're gonna spend more time on the third goaltender position than we probably should because of what happened.
Yep.
Where it's like, hey, and I spent a bunch of time on it last summer simply because they did nothing.
Yep.
And I hated it.
They had literally Adam Werner for a while there.
And then look what they used 2 quality AHL defensemen to go get backups in Bibeau and Hutchinson.
Yep.
And then, one got hurt and the other ended up playing meaningful minutes for him, but it's like he got, Bibeau was the one that was kind of a disaster because he gets hurt right away. And like,
yeah,
if they have Bibeau, they probably don't do the Hutchinson thing at the deadline.
Yep.
And then maybe Callie Rosen is
Callie
still
Rosen
in this conversation.
Right. Well, you have Callie Rosen instead of Kevin Connaughton potentially playing at the end of that series, but it is
maybe he gets more than 7 minutes of ice time or whatever it was that he got in Game 7. I mean, we're in the rabbit hole at that point, just trying to change history because we're still mad about what happened. But the best thing they can do to prepare moving forward is like get a decent third guy and
come equipped.
Not that Hutchinson wasn't, because he's again the archetype of a third guy. But get a guy that you like. If you like Anton Forsberg more than you like Michael Hutchinson, then go and get that guy. If you like Henrik Lundqvist and he for some reason is willing to be a Colorado Eagle, then go get that guy. Do whatever.
Be reasonable and pick a third goalie, basically.
Yeah. And if he gets claimed, then you pick too
another
well.
one. Yeah.
Please stop trading. At that point, maybe I guess that's where you trade Josh Anderson for one.
Annunen should probably be over in 2021.
Fast forward 12 months.
Yep. Assuming he has a solid year.
This time next year, we'll be in training camp, and I expect Annunen will be here.
Yep. That's probably pretty realistic.
Year 2 of his ELC, I can't imagine that they're going to blow more than 1 year of his ELC on him being on to play in Finland.
Yeah. Got to get him in the org, get him into North America for sure. This one, not exactly recent, but we'd never really talked about it just because we had draft stuff to talk about. Ottawa bought out Bobby Ryan. Any consideration there as a depth guy for the Avs, maybe on the cheap?
I would say yes. Kind of in the same way that we've talked about a guy like a Mikael Granlund or a Craig Smith, where it's like you've missed out on a lot of the big guys in free agency for whatever reason. Maybe they wanted too much. They wanted too much term or money, or you weren't comfortable with it, whatever. And the trade market is too expensive for you. New Jersey wants a first-round pick for Kyle Palmieri. Some of these guys some of these forwards that could be available where you're just looking for a top six forward. I think Bobby Ryan on a 1-year deal, sure.
I think that's, if you're making that move, that's critical because he's not a young guy at all. So you're not looking for term at all.
Yeah, the money is irrelevant because they could give him 1 year. They could do like Wayne Simmons last year. They give him $5 million just for the hell of it.
Yep, and it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, and I think at this point, he's gonna pick opportunity that appeals most to him.
Yep.
And if a team like Colorado came calling, a team like a Dallas came calling and said, "Hey, we will see how this fits." If because you put him, I don't even know how I would line it up. I would probably open the year Burakovsky, McKinnon, Rantanen, and then Landeskog, Kadri, and Ryan.
Ryan, yeah.
I'd be fine with that. Like, I wouldn't have any objections.
I'd be okay with it partially because there's a real good chance that means the 13th forward, be it O'Connor or Bowers, gets games because Bobby Ryan's going to break his hand halfway through the season like he does every year. But
Jonas Donskoy can't stay healthy. So.
Yeah, that's true too. So
but the downside of that is that if that pushes Martin Kaut back to the AHL,
that should not
for like 30 games of Bobby Ryan. It's like,
come on, man. Yeah,
we don't want that to happen.
Yep.
They've got to be committed to Kaut.
Yep,
that's all I'm saying.
Regardless
of what they do at forward, they should be committed to him on the roster.
Make room for that dude for sure. Any other juicy ones, AJ, or should we get out of here for today?
We sort of touched on Krug the other day, right?
Yeah, kind of the same conversation where he just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense for the Avs, despite their supposed interest.
Yeah, their interest, they've checked in on Chris Letang. They've checked in on Torrey Krug. Their interest in these like puck movers continues to be kind of odd.
A little weird, yeah.
Yeah, because like when Friedman said that they checked in on Hjalmarsson, it was like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
That's what they need, a bottom 4D that can shut dudes down.
Yeah. The other name that I would keep an eye on in Washington is Brendan Dillon as kind of a shutdown defenseman he's okay on the PK, but he's really good at even strength defensively and has not fallen off of a cliff like Hjalmarsson did this last year. If he makes it to market, I'm just saying, just keep an eye out. Not saying that the Avs are going to prioritize him. They'll be hot and heavy or whatever. Just that keep an eye out for that guy because that's sort of where they want to look to improve. And if the money works and the term works, then they can do that, and then they can always move other guys around at will. I guess since we're getting into the offseason, I'll say this once and only once, but offer sheets are purely something for fans to talk about.
But they never happen.
The one time that it has happened since O'Reilly was last year with Aho, and it was a joke of an offer sheet that had zero chance to succeed.
Carolina instantly was like, great, you did our work for us.
All they did was ensure that Sebastian Aho did not have an RFA holdout like every other RFA team did.
Yep.
Winnipeg had Connor and Laine. The Avs had Rantanen. Like last year's RFA market was hell for everybody but Carolina because Montreal, for some reason, just decided to do the work for them. Yeah. So the idea that we're way more likely to see Tampa Bay try and handle their cap crunch problem here by trading off a Killorn or a Johnson or a Palat or a Gord than we are to see some crazy offer sheet
with on point or something.
Cirelli is the RFA.
Yeah, that's Cirelli. My bad.
Yeah, and it's like that's the GMs around the league don't like them anyway.
Leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, it just serves as a means to piss off other GMs. So if you were going to try to get Sergachev or Chernak or Cirelli on an offer sheet, you open yourself up to somebody coming after you. The offers, I say it every year, but offer sheets are purely for fans to talk about. They are not meaningful tools for GMs to make use of.
Well, if you are a fan that wants to talk about it, highly recommend the DNVR Lounge. We were talking about Brendan Dillon just the other day in there. I was. Oh. I was talking about it with Spence and a couple other guys in there. But if you're a member of DNVR, all you have to do is go to the website and hit the DNVR Lounge button to join us over on Discord. If you're not a member, now is a great time to become one. You can chat with all of us. We have a ton of channels in there where people are just hanging out, talking shop, hockey, and otherwise. So highly recommend you become part of the family now. It's a great time, especially with the draft coming up. We've talked about it a little bit, but behind the scenes, AJ and I are starting to see all this draft live show that we're going to be doing on draft day come together, and it looks so awesome. Like, I am so hyped for the draft show that we're about to be doing. So on Tuesday,
like, we haven't even talked about day 2 yet because we're pouring everything into
day 1,
the show on day 1.
Yep. So it's going to be awesome. If you're local, be sure to keep your eyes peeled for the sign up to come on down to the DNVR bar and be part of the show potentially live down there. Otherwise, if you're not local, you can always catch us here on YouTube. We'll be live doing all sorts of stuff. It's going to be awesome. You can play along with some of the games we're going to have. We're going to have a ton of graphics and all sorts of highlights, you name it, for the entire first round. It's a full-on production. We're going to be your draft show to watch. Forget, I don't even know, NBC, is that what channel is on? Forget that. Just
have that
DNVR show.
Straight up on your phone, on a laptop or something, have it on mute. We're going to be the show you guys want to watch.
Yep. So I'm pumped for it. I hope you guys are pumped as well. We're going to get out of here for the day, though. Our final sponsor today is Chevalier Mortgage. You can find them over at DNVRmortgage.com. Mike and Virginia Chevalier, not only diehard Broncos fans and proud CSU alums, they've been longtime DNVR members themselves. They're a husband and wife team with over 15 years of financial experience. And when you visit them at DNVRmortgage.com, you can enter to win a free DNVR shirt or hat of your choice just by showing up to their website. So why not try and win some free gear, but most importantly, get set up with a free consultation to discuss all of your options with them. Since your home is likely to be one of your largest assets and your mortgage your largest debt, they believe it's vital to consider your full financial picture when purchasing a home. This includes considering your short-term and long-term planning goals, your investments, and your tax situation. Mike and Virginia will work tirelessly to find the best loan for your situation. If you don't want to go to DNVR Mortgage, you can call Virginia directly at 303-257-6578. Michael Chevalier, NMLS 1931006. Virginia Chevalier, NMLS 1910631. All right. That's it for today's show. really enjoyed Chris Peters coming on and talking a little bit of draft with us. We have Will Scouch coming on tomorrow as well, and then the mock draft on Friday. So
Draft on Friday. You have pick number 1.
Do I? Okay.
Right?
That's not a hard pick to make.
Hold on, let me pull up you. I'm pretty sure you have 1. Yeah, you have 1.
Did you link something that I missed? I don't know.
Holtby, I haven't heard anything to answer Jesse's question. Jesse hanging out with us. What's up, dude? I haven't heard anything about the Avs and Holtby.
I don't want anything to do with Holtby, so that's fine with me.
Same. If they go out and they get Holtby, they're praying for the fountain of youth on that one.
Yep. Maybe one too many times at the Washington well at that point.
Yeah.
So
how pissed would Grubauer be? Like, come on.
Really, dude?
Doing this again? I honestly will be fascinated to see what Holtby gets, because 3 really, really poor regular seasons in a row, but 30 years old with the track record that he has and him being a horse like he's been in his career, I think Holtby's market will be legitimately fascinating. But anyway, mock draft. You have pick number 1. I have pick number 2. I think you know what you're doing with 1. I do not know what I'm doing with 2.
The draft doesn't begin until pick number 2.
Yeah, I really don't know. I am truly, truly torn on my pick there.
So there you go. Be sure to tune in Friday to figure out AJ's answer, and we'll be going all the way through at least the Avs pick, if not the full first round.
We've got full first round scheduled.
So there you go.
We're going to be using we're going to have a draft board, and we're using a simulator. We're going to be
Dario will be on to give a third voice as well.
Yep.
So.
Dario actually has 11 of the picks of the 31. You and I each have 10, and he has 11.
Be nice getting New Jersey.
I have New Jersey.
Oh, you have the 3 picks?
I got New Jersey, and you got the Rangers with 2.
So he must have Ottawa then.
So he does have Ottawa. Yeah. It would have been funny for me to get both Ottawa and New Jersey, and like the majority of my
2 teams.
Yeah, the majority of my time spent drafting is for those 2 clubs that nobody cares about.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to the next week. Again, thank you everyone for watching, listening, however you consume the podcast. Looking forward to hearing from you guys on Friday. Tomorrow's show will be a pre-recorded one, so not live, but it will be up on YouTube as usual.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time, we'll see you later.